Okay.
We're good. All right. Well, I'll officially call the meeting to order and start with some announcements. First is a continuation of the public hearing to consider a local law amending the Irvington zoning code to create the multifamily office district for Monday, May 3rd, 2021 at 7 p.m. That's our next meeting. So we're actually taking a little bit of a break from that particular public hearing, which has been open now for, I don't know how long, but many months. Do we need a motion for that, Larry, or just a continuation?
Yeah, do a motion.
Okay, so
Sure.
I'll make a motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We might start having people opposed, but
Ryan, can I just say one thing about that on that announcement?
sure.
While the public hearing will be on the new local law, it will also be to go through the secret form again to see whether there's any other issues that need to be identified, environmental issues. So if anybody has anything to say about that, they should also raise those issues at their public hearing.
Okay, very well. Next up is an announcement that there's going to be a drug disposal day on April 24th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Village Hall. I was talking to the police chief, and it looks like there's going to be a rally this Saturday. So they are probably going to move up the closing of the drug disposal day and reschedule a second day. But from now, if you have things you want to drop off, I'd get there before noon if you can.
What is the nature of the rally and where is it?
It's at Village Hall, and I believe it's like similar to the Black Lives Matter rally again. Some details are still being filled in, but I believe it's going to be 1 to 3 p.m. is when the rally is scheduled. So if you want to drop off your drugs, that'll be earlier. I also will just make a mention, we have a formal appointments later on in the meeting, but the reason I'm wearing a suit on a Zoom call for the first time is I just had the pleasure of swearing in the new fire department officers down at the firehouse. And now I'm back home to Zoom, but it was nice. We have a new chief, and the two assistant chiefs I think they have about 1,000 years experience between them. Anthony Tarracone and James Ruffler are second assistant and first assistant, and Daniel Billings is the new chief, which, I guess spoiler alert for number 9 on the agenda, but they did not want to do a Zoom meeting tonight, Zoom swearing in. They said they'd rather do it in person if we could. So I said, why not? This way they could, especially Danny, he has a young family, so they got to celebrate him becoming chief. So it was a nice evening so far.
So David Dowd is,
David Dowd, he's no longer chief, but he is now back to lieutenant. So that probably means in 2 years, he'll probably be back to being assistant chief again. It seems like it's one of those thankless jobs that you keep coming around. It's hard to get all the courses and everything. So we're very lucky that we have such, dedicated folks that continue.
yeah, well, I wanted to send my thanks to him. I think I did before, but.
Yes. And he was there. And it actually was funny. Anthony Tarracone presented him with a big zero balloon, which everyone's like, what is that for? He was the first chief in memory that didn't have a working fire in his 2 years as chief. So I don't know if his fire prevention was just better than everybody else, or if he's just very lucky, but we'll go with a combination of the two. But it was nice not to have a working fire for his 2 years. So I hope Chief Billings is as fortunate.
Yeah.
The next item is, does anyone else have any announcements? Other than thanking outgoing Chief Dowd again. But correspondence, I will actually just go ahead and say that we received a ton of correspondence this morning, I guess since last night. I frankly haven't been able to go through it all. They were still coming in as I was going down to the firehouse. So I don't even know. It's pretty much all on the discussion of opening Matheson Park to non-residents or not. And I frankly haven't been able to go through them all to kind of even give a tally. They're obviously too late to be included in official correspondence. They will be for our next meeting, but I can assure everyone that my colleagues and I are all reading them carefully, and we will consider all of them. And we appreciate you taking your time to, send us your thoughts on this important topic. But I believe that's the only correspondence we had, Larry, right? We didn't have any for this meeting. So that being the case, I will open up for public comment that's not about something on the agenda. So not about the, not concerning the public hearing What about any other topic that anybody has? Richard Turk?
Me unmute. Yes, hi. Hi, everybody.
Where are you?
I live in the River House in Irvington on the corner of Buckout Street, abutting Matheson Park. And the residents are a little concerned about possible upcoming usage of Matheson Park for outside of Irvington residents. Is that part of tonight's discussion?
That is, yep, that's number 6 down below. There's actually going to be a public hearing.
Okay, I didn't see any of those on here on my Zoom, so I will, shall I wait for that to happen?
We'll let you speak first, Mr. Turk.
Okay, so I recently, I was the president of the condo for a number of years, and I recently have, not in that position, but I'm still on the board. So we're just trying to get a lay of the land of what might happen. Obviously, our small condo is very close in proximity to Bridge Street, and with that being the only egress in and out, we are concerned about parking. We've seen what's happened on the 4th of July on certain events where the entire lower village gets inundated with traffic, cars, pedestrians, you name it. So the 12 residents who live in that area of River House are a bit concerned of how that might work if it is opened up to outside of Irvington residents.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone who has any other topics besides Matheson Park that they'd like to talk about now? Otherwise, while you're thinking about it, I'll move on to the consent agenda. Did anybody have any questions on the consent agenda? Otherwise, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, well, now I will make a motion to open the public hearing to consider a local law amending Chapter 55 of the Village Code. This is not the Matheson Parks, that's number 7, but public hearing to consider a local law amending Chapter 55 of the Village Code personnel with respect to residency requirements for certain officers. I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Larry, did you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, as we discussed at the last meeting when we introduced this. This local law modifies residency requirements for a few of the positions that we already have in the village. They're positions that we had never anticipated as being residents only by civil service law and by New York state law. The particular positions in this case happen to be assistant building inspector. We're also including clerk and treasurer in that. And so we're taking advantage of a provision in New York state law to extend residency for those particular positions to residents of the county. And so that's done by local law, and that's what you have in front of you. So it's really fairly ministerial, but that's the background on it.
Great. And as you say, we did discuss it at our last meeting, and it is pretty straightforward and is really housekeeping. But that being said, I will open up to any questions from our board and then open up to any questions from the public. If there are no questions from the public, I will make a motion to close the public hearing. If I can have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now, I don't see a resolution, but I will just make one up.
Apologize, yeah.
Resolve to amend Chapter 55 of the Village Code personnel with respect to residency requirements for certain officers. I'll make the motion if I can have a second.
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 All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next up is discussion of rules for Matheson Park. Larry, did you want to give a little history of, how we've got here, or am I putting you two on the spot? I'm actually, I meant earlier today to kind of put together a timeline. I can kind of guesstimate my timeline. or maybe I could refer back to them from the mayor's desk. But we started talking about kind of two things. They're kind of related, very related, but the possibility of opening Matheson Park to non-residents, which I believe we started looking at almost 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
And part of that process was obviously working closely with RPAC, the Recreation and Parks Advisory Committee, which is the volunteer board that works so hard all the time for the rec department. Obviously, rec department staff, and we did have some public input back then. I think we felt as a board we needed more information, so pretty much everyone on the board spoke to either their other mayors, trustees, recreation directors, village administrators from kind of different communities that we identified as having similar waterfront parks with similar amenities, barbecues, picnic tables, et cetera, to get their input on what works, what doesn't work, what to avoid, what to embrace. And then I think we also went to RPAC and our staff and asked what kind of costs could potentially be associated with opening this up to opening up Matheson Park to non-residents, as well as what rules would have to be in place. And the rules before you have been characterized as whether we opened up to residents or not. These are their recommended rules. So I think that's obviously there was changes. We've had a massive renovation, the largest one in probably 30 years of Matheson Park. We're going to be making a large change to allow scooters and bikes, which is something that's never been done. We had to widen the paths. There's been a lot of changes in Matheson Park, so we had to come up with some rules for that. And probably the most controversial rule I've heard so far is that for 1 year anyway, we're not going to allow dogs into the park, which we had been doing on a trial basis. I think some of that is related to the use of scooters and bikes and the new playground and just kind of getting the flow of the park. So that is the one rule that I've actually gotten some feedback on, and I would say that it's been characterized from the beginning as kind of a temporary rule, we hope, and we would like to get dogs back into the park as soon as practical. Those are kind of that's my intro. I don't know if anybody else has other things they want to say, but I view tonight mostly as an opportunity to hear what the public thinks about the rules, of course, but also the bigger issue of shall we open up Matheson Park to non-residents, which has not been done in 80 years, at least not formally done in 80 years. The last 3 or 4 years before the park was closed, the policy was not to turn anyone away other than groups, but officially the park was still not residents only, and you needed a permit. So that's how I'll set it up tonight. We've obviously have been talking about this for several years. COVID and the park being closed for construction have slowed these discussions down, but we're back again, and we hope to have the park open, by early June, if not Memorial Day, then by early June. So it's a timely discussion to have now.
So I just have a question about, in order to read these final letters, did you want to plan to do this again at the next meetings, or did you want to finish that tonight, or what was your timeline here?
My timeline, that I think that for me personally, I think I'd like to wait to make any action until at least next week, our next meeting, which would be May 3rd, just because we did receive so much correspondence today, and I'm hoping we hear a lot today. But I think except that there's a overwhelming consensus formed, I would like to wait for the next meeting on May 3rd to make any definitive decisions. So.
I would just comment that we got an awful lot of letters today. I read through all of them, and most of them were of a single mind that the park ought to be open to the general public. One of the things I'm curious, and I think possibly 1 or 2 of the letters address this, and this was something that we spoke about extensively at our work session this past Wednesday, and something that the Rec and Parks Department purposely did not make a suggestion or recommendation about, and that is the use of limited resources within the park. I'm speaking mostly of group permits and access to the barbecues, and whether that is something that should in some way be advantage to village residents in terms of having an opportunity to reserve earlier, or if in some way that should be differentiated. And I'd be curious to hear from the public about that.
Thank you, Larry. Anybody else?
I just wanted to say that want to be sure that we keep track of this as we go forward, including the, how the process is working in terms of managing the park, how the staffing levels are working. We've committed a lot of resource in terms of one-time resource and in terms of recurring personnel costs. I just want to be sure that, it's what we need and it's working. And, that's something we can monitor over the course of the next season after it opens.
Well, I'm very interested in the question that Larry Lonke asked about the way in which the scarce resources are allocated. I know there's an online system of registering things that we didn't have, I don't know, you can remind me, a year ago, we didn't have that kind of recreation department system to set up other things. So I'm very interested, and I would assume that at the next meeting we'll have, I certainly will be able to put together my own thoughts about that kind of scarce resource and how that might work, as per your question, Larry.
Very good. We had two quick questions over here to the panel. We're planning on reading the letters. I'm not planning on reading them all into the record tonight. There's just too many of them. And related question, how many letters, emails have arrived in recent days relative to Matheson Park? I haven't even counted them, to be honest. I would say
close to 20.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was going to say 30, but. I was
going to say a couple dozen. So, and I know, like, I stopped, I had to focus on something else after about 4:30 and they were still coming in. So, that's why, again, I don't think we want to read them all right now because I haven't even read them all myself. So we have a couple people with their hands up already if the trustees don't have anything more to say right now. Ginny LeBlanc.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I also live in River House and I am on the board here, and I'd like to speak on behalf of the 13 residents that live here. Our concerns are really about quality of life for the most part. We chose to live here in Irvington because it is beautiful and peaceful, and there are a number of issues that pose a threat to that, we feel, in terms of opening the park up to the public, including traffic issues, parking, noise, and litter. River House is directly across from Matheson Park and the single tiny bridge that leads into and out of it. Traffic on the bridge is already heavy in warm months due to sunset gazers in the adjacent parking lot, the restaurants near the waterfront, and public access to our other beautiful park of 12 acres, Scenic Hudson. This does not take into account volume increases due to a new restaurant opening on the corner of Buckout and Main, nor does it consider a new housing unit a few doors down on Astor. This would be a terrible congestion issue for Irvington. If you've ever been here on the 4th of July, then you know what I mean. Litter. I walk my dog every morning for 2 years along Bridge Street and up to Scenic Hudson and back. The amount of garbage thrown on the ground on weekends or on days when there were baseball games or other events was staggering. Noise. There is already a fair amount of noise from tailgaters, watching the sunset, playing music from their cars, and also general noise from gathering of crowds in the parking lot. Opening Matheson Park to the general public is completely unnecessary given the amount of recreation space provided by Scenic Hudson. A few questions to consider. How will the town monitor gatherings? Will there be a limit on size, times, noise levels? How will that be enforced? Will there be additional monitoring of the park? Will outside organizations now be able to use the park for events? How will this change affect taxes at a time when assessments have been rising at a considerable rate? How can we assure the quality of life here in Irvington will not be threatened? With these thoughts, I express on behalf of Riverhouse Board our strong opposition to opening Matheson up to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. One thing I didn't mention was that if everyone can try to keep their comments to 3 minutes or less. Additionally, if someone has already said what you wanted to say, you can just say, I agree with the previous comments and not have to say them all again. We will consider that a full statement and take into consideration your thoughts. That being said, how about Kay O'Keefe, Larry? Hello, Kay. Looks like you're muted.
Oh, all right. Sorry about that.
All right.
It is necessary to open the park to the general public because that's what the deed specified, even though Irvington residents have been living under the impression that the park was solely meant for village residents. That's not true. The deed stated that it was to be open to the public. And I know many people have a lot to say about this, so I'm going to let that go because I also want to bring up the fact that last year, after we were not allowed to have 1 acre out of 400 acres of woodland to have a dog park, as a compensation or consolation, we were able to take our dogs into Matheson Park after paying a fee with very strict restrictions. They had to only be there certain hours and only be in a certain part of the park. I don't think it's right to take that away. You can at least leave those restrictions in place and allow people to bring their dogs in the park.
Okay.
And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Peter Bernstein.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, good evening. First of all, just wanted to take a quick note to thank you guys, especially Larry and Brenda, for your great work on the budget. I haven't been at a meeting since the budget got released. I know it's a big job and just congratulations on a job well done on that. Today I'm feeling like a little bit of deja vu because I feel like we had these conversations 2 years ago. At the time, the public comments were overwhelmingly in favor of opening the park. And rightfully, you folks decided you need to do some due diligence, which you've now done. So I'm anxious. I hope, you go ahead and make the decision to open the park. Many of the questions raised by the person who spoke before Kay, you've addressed in the rules. Which was the responsible thing to do. So you're protecting the community against some of the fears about opening the park by having rules and by looking out over stuff. Matheson Park is so special to our family. We've lived in the vicinity of the park for 25 years. The first realtor who showed us our house, sent us to the park, which kind of sealed the deal. We raised our kids in the park. My daughter had her Memorial Day birthday parties in the park. So many family memories. And now the park is kind of sad and underutilized. We go to Tarrytown's Park. We walk all the way from, the start of it, just north of the bridge, all the way past the lighthouse to Kingsland Park now. There's not a gate. There are no rangers. There are just people, old, young, all families, unrestricted, having a great time and making the family memories that, we made in Matheson Park. So, let's be the welcoming community. Let's, go forward. You've done your due diligence. Again, the community overwhelmingly is in support of opening the park. You're never going to get 100% agreement on that. But I think as you saw 2 years ago, and as you'll see tonight, and from the letters you received, there's like broad agreement that it won't hurt Irvington to be a welcoming community and let everybody enjoy our wonderful park. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Felix, keeping the streak alive?
Yeah, I have to now. I've set a bar for myself. How are you guys?
Good, how are
I
you?
had a few things I wanted to ask about. I had some questions about the rules and then just a brief comment about, the topic du jour. Just on the rules, which I really appreciate. I thought that was obviously a very thoughtful effort. There were just some things that weren't addressed in there that I wanted to ask about. One was about permitting and whether we could consider, for example, charging for groups smaller than 50 as a way to help offset costs. I don't know what the right number is, but 50 seemed pretty high to me. I don't know if 20 or something like that, and whether we could charge more if the park is open to non-residents. Could we charge more to non-residents to offset some of the increased costs? I also thought that it would be important, if possible, to keep the permitting right in the town's sole discretion. And that's just because I think, there's probably going to be things or groups down the line that we're not going to want to give a permit to, whether that's political organizations of one stripe or another, or whatever it might be, that we can't necessarily draft for today. I just, again, I worry about, regardless of, again, who the park is open to, that we don't have the right protections for ourselves, and not limiting that right, I think, is important. I had a question about sort of loud music and live music in general, mostly around, I think we can all agree there's certain types of loud music that are a nuisance and disruptive. And then, and again, I don't know, I'm thinking somebody bringing in a boombox or something and playing loud music of some kind versus some other kinds of music, which are not. Maybe, if a local kid wants to come and set up a guitar, and play some kid songs or something and collect some money on a weekend, everyone would probably be happy with that. And I didn't know if we had a good feel for how we would police those things. Again, just not wanting to get caught, in ambiguity. In terms of the animals, I think, I know one thing I'll just mention is someone who lives near the aqueduct. We have a huge problem with people not picking up after their animals. It seems like daily there's posts on local Facebook groups about irresponsible people not doing that. And I hate that for the responsible pet owners, but it is something to consider as you think about ways to let dogs kind of, back in. And then just one last thing about the rules, they're really just around things that weren't addressed in the high level rules that I saw that I think are obviously, somehow going to be enforced. Things like no weapons, no fighting, and how that stuff, if that's just covered by some overall town ordinance, or how that's, because it just wasn't spelled out in the version that I saw from the working meeting last week. And then lastly, and then I'll shut up, just in terms of opening or not opening the park, I'm new and I'm not going to try to restate all the various arguments that have been made. I just wonder whether making that decision based on a relatively small sample size, whether it's letters or the number of people that actually take the time to speak at one of these meetings, is really giving you kind of a full picture of how people feel. I know I read somewhere that you're not allowed to do a referendum, which sounds like a binding way to make the decision, but I wonder if a Survey Monkey, kind of like what you did for the policing forum, would be a way to get sort of a more statistically representative response. And it may be that, that it is overwhelmingly one way or the other. But I think we all know sometimes the most passionate and committed are the only ones that take the time. And they may or may not.
You can just wrap it up, my friend. Sorry, if you just quickly wrap up, we're over 3 minutes.
That's it. That's it. I made my point.
Appreciate it. Jim Pizer.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, trustees. Thank you very much for the opportunity to chime in. Unfortunately, I just am going to kind of say, what Kay said and what Peter says, kind of, I would echo much of their sentiment. On the topic of dogs in Matheson Park, this is something that, I feel very, very strongly that, that dogs should be allowed in the park, and that we should also be encouraging responsible dog ownership throughout the village. In a more direct way. I've definitely seen these Facebook posts that Felix was referring to regarding the aqueduct. I can't speak for, any particular dog owners, but I do know that there are also some wild animals that run around too. So I don't think it's entirely fair to say, oh yeah, this is all dogs or whatever. But I would encourage the board to consider reviewing section 83.3 of the village code with respect to the fines applicable for dog related violations. And perhaps in opening Matheson Park, adding a bit more of a stick, so to speak, to some of the, a $25 fine doesn't scare a lot of people, but perhaps if there's a way to legally, arrange for a higher violation level for infractions within the park boundaries, that may be a way to both satisfy, some people that are concerned, and also to, recoup revenue in the unfortunate event that happens. So anyway, just a thought, but I really thank you all for your very thoughtful process on this.
Thank you, Jim. Leola?
Hi. I just wanted to comment about, I'm in favor of making the park public, and I've written about that before, so I don't want to repeat everything I've said before. But just in terms of the concerns of our River House neighbors, I live 1 block from them. I've lived 2 blocks from the park for 25 years, and the park has mostly been public. Really, during the summer months, there's an attendant, but the gate is open during daylight hours and people have enjoyed it. There haven't been droves of people like 4th of July on a regular day. And I do think we need to kind of curb or put some regulations around big things like 4th of July. I get it. And so in terms of the trash, I think it's far more complex than people using a public park, because it's happening all over Irvington. And so I'm not so sure I'm concerned about a whole lot more trash pressure, as long as the Wrexham Park use their usual schedules of pickup like they have before. But so this part though is sort of new, and that is all of the extra expense and regulations. I think we need to look a lot more closely at that. I'm not so sure why we need attendants at all. We didn't have them before except summer, and I don't see why we would go through that expense now. Because there's limited parking, I just don't think we'll see droves of people coming. We haven't in all of the years that it's been somewhat open to the public anyway. And so, yes, of course, I feel for them. But if we had also better walking and biking, people wouldn't have to drive to the park. So if we could work on those safety issues. I would also ask that budget for extra money that's been put aside for attendance and things be used to make sure the park is mitigated for climate disasters. So resilient to those sorts of things if we have that money to spend. What was my other point? Oh, yes. So in terms of the rules, so I would ask you to make the park public and not feel the need to implement all kinds of rules, including, as I understand, there is to be a new rule about kayaks, where if you don't have your kayak on the rack, you can't access the park to launch your kayak. I don't understand that. I have had a kayak on the rack, but an Irvington neighbor has not, and would meet me there with her kayak to kayak with me. So why would we restrict people to not having the ability to launch their kayak from Matheson Park? So my point about that is that I just think that a lot of these rules, we really need to involve actual users of these types of things, and to kind of look at the rules a little bit more carefully and separate the rulemaking from whether the park should be public or not.
Okay, yeah, we're at 3 minutes, so I will thank you for your comments, Leila.
Thank you.
Mr. Turk, come back around.
Mute. I'm sorry. Thank you. So yes, taking it full circle, I think the River House residents, first of all, we're very bonded together. It's a really wonderful small community. All around us, there's gentrification on Astor Street, on Main Street. Brizard has outdoor tables. And I think Matheson Park, to me, is underused, but it's sort of like a little private Idaho. I could sit down there and watch the sunset, and there's only the ducks around me and the boats on the river. So it's quite a lovely place. However, when it is open, I didn't know of it being open to the public, in quotations. I don't know if it's open to the public. However, I just cannot imagine where between train traffic, the parking down by the restaurants and the commercial on Bridge Street, where parking is such a problem as it is right now. I don't understand how it could possibly be open to vehicular traffic. If that bridge has one problem, then what? You know, I moved in 2007 when the bridge was being under some construction. I can only imagine how difficult things would be if we got to an open park down there with that one egress. All the other parks that I have gone into, as was mentioned, Tarrytown, have a far greater access area to enter the park area. Matheson Park is very difficult to enter. And if you had additional vehicular traffic, it would be nightmarish. But I know that's been part of the conversation. So that's just my roundabout last comment.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Lisa?
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Mayor Smith. Thank you, Board of Trustees. I guess the first thing I want to do is just reference back to everything that Peter said and incorporate that into my remarks. I really agree with that, and his remarks in particular spoke to me, though I agree with others as well. I have written to the board extensively on the issue of opening Matheson Park, so I don't want to restate everything I've said. I think the board should do that. I think the board should do that quickly and make that decision to open the park to all in time for it to be open to all when the park opens, hopefully by Memorial Day or in early June. So I just urge the board not to delay unduly making a decision that's been, getting teed up for the last couple of years. So the main point I want to make is to please urge the board to open the park. And then a couple of secondary points on the rules. I wanted to urge the board to, as Leola said, perhaps dispense with the gate attendants on the weekends, or if you'll have gate attendants, instead of having them at the gate, have them sit at the bottom of the hill in Matheson at a table. So they're there more to be welcoming, and there isn't a perception created from them being at the gate that they're there to bounce people or keep them out. I think just having a person at the gate sends exactly the wrong message for a park that we want to have be welcoming. I also agree with the comments that are made about letting dogs into the park. I don't even have a dog, but I think if we want this to be a village commons, we want it to be a place that's welcoming for families to bring their pets in. So those are the couple of rules that I wanted to mention. And then one last point I wanted to make, which is something new I wanted to raise. Just two ideas I think are sweet for improving the park. One is to get a little free library installed in Matheson Park. That's something that exists in the Reynolds Field Park in Hastings and some other parks and playgrounds as well. And it's just a nice opportunity for community sharing of books. And the second thing is a buddy bench. I don't know if you're all familiar with the buddy bench movement, but it's around in a lot of school playgrounds and in other parks. And it's a bench, usually colorful and a little bit different in style, that has inspirational sayings like the only way to have a friend is to be one, or if you can be anything, be kind. And one thing I wanted to mention about those things is that I know both a carpenter and a local, an Irvington-based carpenter and artist who would both be delighted. I just spoke to them to help fabricate and paint such a bench if that was something the board was interested in doing, at least to have a bench painted, even if it was a prefabricated one. I think this would be a really beautiful way to both decorate the park and also to signal the message of inclusion and sort of anti-bullying and having everybody be welcome in our park. So that's it. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to a speedy decision to open the park. Thanks again.
Thanks, Lisa. Elaine?
Thank you all for how hard you work and taking this issue so very seriously. I am not going to bore you with repeating what my friend Lisa Gann did such a good job of saying. So there's only really probably one piece that I would like to underscore. And I feel that we have been talking about this for a very long time. In fact, when I look at my friend Larry Lonke, I realized that he was participating in the Parks and Recs Advisory Board, having the hearings on this issue before he was on the board. I can't remember how long he's been on the board for, but we have been having hearings on this, listening tours by the Parks and Recs Advisory Board. I have sent letters at least on 2 or 3 occasions to this board because you have solicited them. I think what I would like to underscore is I think it's time to act and move forward. And I hope that the board is able to do so. I appreciate the process that you have already afforded this community. And I agree with Trustee Kehoe that we do have to indeed look at some issues of priority for residents. And I would also like to underscore Trustee Gillihan's remarks about looking at some of our proposed rules as almost provisional, like a look and see approach and evaluate them as we put them into effect and see what's working and what's not working. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Tom?
I am unmuted. Good evening. Thanks for inviting comments about this. And I'm just going to echo a little bit of what Peter and Lisa and Elaine and other folks said. It does feel a little bit like Groundhog Day. We've been going through this process for a couple of years, and it was my understanding when this process came to a halt a number of months ago that the Board of Trustees was going to spend the next number of months studying this issue and come to some kind of decision. And I think all the arguments have been made. They've been made in public forums. They've been made in letters. They've been made in articles in the Enterprise. They've been made in opinion pieces. And I don't really think there's very much more to say. So I really hope and I trust that the board will come to the decision that I think the overwhelming majority of residents of Irvington want the board to come to, which is to open the park to the public and really to bring this chapter to a close. And it's been an interesting process. I think it's been a good democratic process where all sorts of different voices have been heard. But at this point, I really think it's time really to make a decision without deliberating any further. And I hope that you make the decision to open up the park. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. William McIntyre.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, then. So I reside at 13 Matheson Park South. One of our entrances is on Astor, very close to the entrance to Matheson Park. And I apologize for only coming to this issue recently, but you know, simply put, from my point of view, there is no benefit. Having access to a park that was relatively, you know, quiet, you know, a place where I could bring my dogs, a place where I keep my 2 kayaks, a place where I have my children join me for the 4th of July. You know, all of those things seem to be of diminishing importance here in terms of, and I apologize, but what I'm understanding is that either this is an issue that relates to the deed and that it was somehow misinterpreted for 80 years, or and am I assuming correctly this is an initiative from the board to open the park?
Correct.
Okay, so simply put, the benefit is that we will be more magnanimous, that it is underutilized. I mean, I'm not sure what exactly we're addressing here, other than, you know, from my point of view, it's simply a loss of a benefit that I would appreciate understanding why.
Sure. I think again, this is much more listening, but I think one of the tangible things we have talked about is the ability to apply for grants, which we are not able to do when it's a private park. That's one very tangible benefit. And then there's, you know, there are the intangibles of, you know, we always thought that this was a restricted park that we were not allowed to open. And then now that we, you know, reread the deed and said, you know, even if it was 80 years later, you know, do we want to keep it closed? And, you know, I think that's what we've been figuring out.
But everyone understood the attention 80 years ago. We're reinterpreting that, right?
We don't really think that that's the case. So, because we do have other parks like Halsey Park or Halsey Pond that was specifically deed restricted. This was just, you know, for the public enjoyment. So, you know, to me, it depends on how, you know, who knows what they were thinking in 1940. But
okay, and you know, in terms of quality of life, my neighbor Rajan, you know, there are often people on his front lawn because they think it's a park, and I just simply see more of that. I'm more concerned about my kayak, fewer places to walk my dog, and we'll find some place to go for 4th of July. So I realize this is a minority opinion and unlikely to in any way be persuasive, but I do appreciate the opportunity to at least mention it. And so if I have one request, it would simply be that we actually do a survey. I realize that this has gone on for a while and that in fact, you know, it may be time for a decision and you may make a decision. But I don't think this was broadly publicized, and that a survey would at least be a tangible data-driven point to say that yes, the majority is in favor. And
thank you very much for taking the time to join the meeting tonight.
Thank you.
Nina and/or John Caparel Dawson. You know, sometimes John uses Nina's login, so.
Yes, it's me.
I knew it. How are you, John?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I've been a little preoccupied with other things for the village and haven't stayed on top of this topic since before the construction started, because I had thought that we were going to look at this park issue after it reopened and monitor it for a year to see if the usage was going to change from what it had been before. I don't know if that was somehow changed or whatever. That's one issue. Secondly, I'd like to know more about the additional cost that was estimated and how much that impacts the taxpayers of the village. I know that you already put it into the budget, but I was just curious as to how suddenly we're able to come up with additional funds for that. Next, I disagree with the interpretation. Being a history teacher, the word public in 1940 meant something totally different than it does in a more global world today. Everything was a lot more isolated and concentric than it is today. I mean, you know, when you talked about to the public, that meant to the people of Irvington and the surrounding. Now, if you wanted to include the school district, that would be one thing that would make sense. But to open it up to anybody coming from anywhere in the world, That's a different situation, I think, that it wasn't than the interpretation presently for what the deed says. Third, if this is such an overwhelming majority of people are saying all of this, why don't we just put it to a referendum and have it done once and for all? Then there's no disagreements with anybody. And lastly, just one thing to consider. If you open up this park, you open up the park. You can't have restrictions on who can use some part of it, because that goes against what your purpose is for opening the park. So if you really can't have permits being allocated to village residents versus anybody else. If you're opening it, it's open, in my mind, if you're going to be honest with what it is that you're doing here. Other than that, I hope you're all having a better evening than you appear to look like you're having. I'm sorry that you're going all through this so often.
I have a tie on. Don't I look?
Yeah, you do. It's amazing.
It's like Haley's Comet.
I'm not going to ask what you're wearing below the jacket and tie.
That's not, yeah. I plead the fifth.
But I appreciate everything that you guys have done. Having been on the police reinvention committee, you guys were great in the way that you acted with that, and the aftermath of it. I thank you so much for what you've done. So please.
Thank you for being on that, and the school board as well, and all that you and Nina do for the village.
Thank you.
Thank you. Greg? Hey, Greg.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
All right, how are you?
Good.
Good. Thank you guys all. And I also want to start off by thanking the police and the village employees, specifically Krista Polly and Scott Brennan, who have done an outstanding job, as you guys all know, taking care of the parks. I'd like to echo somewhat what William McIntyre and the previous caller said. And I have some safety concerns about the park as well. I think we all have to ask ourselves, will the park be as safe as it is now? Now, it's a yes or no question. And the second question I would say is, will you feel as comfortable sending your children as residents to the park? It's also a yes or no question. If the answer is no to any of those questions, then I think this is a foolish decision to open the park to the public. And then I have secondly, I have comments about the diversity and inclusivity in our community. And I think that was partially what drove the impetus for this forum. And, in my mind, real diversity is when my child sits next to another child in school and there's an exchange of cultural ideas. That's real diversity. Opening a park is not real diversity. It doesn't make any sense to me. In fact, I think when you consider the increased costs and you want to invite others to join our community on a permanent basis, I mean, people should move into our town and they should be able to afford a home here. And when you preclude them from doing that because you've increased the cost of maintenance, garbage removal, maintenance on buildings, and all of those other things associated with this park decision, coupled with the fact that we've all had this increase in assessment recently, I think it's a real slap in the face to people who might want to join our community on a permanent basis. So I feel like it has the opposite effect on what we'd like to do here in our community, which is invite people, again, on a permanent basis, not have them look up the hill at the $1 million homes and say, gee, I'll never afford those homes. I think that should all be taken into consideration. And I do agree that this issue has not been publicized the way it should have been publicized. It feels like these meetings kind of happen under the cover of the night. And so I'd like you guys to make a huge effort in getting everybody to be more aware before you make your decision, because I think the sentiment is not exactly what you think it is. And again, I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks for your letter, I don't know, about 3 months ago on the same topic. So thanks.
Very welcome.
Arlene?
Hi.
Hello.
You know, I just want to say that, you know, I think I became aware of this discussion more than 2 years ago. And I went to a meeting when we were still meeting in person with my, at the time, 5-year-old daughter, to talk about what it's like to be a person of color in Irvington and not feel welcome. And I think one of the biggest places is a park. When you go to a park and someone's sitting at the front gate, and even though you're a resident, you think that they're going to stop and ask you for your park pass, or, you don't look like what people think people look like that live in $1 million homes because you're a person of color. And, you just generally don't think people belong here. It's very difficult to take this issue out of just a bigger conversation about what historically has happened in communities, and historically how we end up with very white suburbs, and how we end up with resources in certain communities and resources not in other communities. And it's difficult to ignore the underlying fear of the outsiders coming into our community. I think, as a lawyer, I find it more problematic, right, to have a policy that you don't enforce, to have people at a gate, because I think you sort of are creating this possibility of selective enforcement. And I think for the village, that's not a good position to be in, right? I think if the village has decided, I think for more than 3 years, really that policy hadn't been enforced. I think I learned that 2 years ago at one of the meetings. Then, this has been a process of what type of community do we want to be? Do we want to be a welcoming community? You can't be a welcoming community and have closed parks, right? You can't, as you said, Brian, you can't even get funding because you have a park that is restricted. I just don't think that this is not something that has been done through the night. I feel like I've written 1,000 letters, and I apologize that you have to read all those letters that I personally have written among other letters. But this is something that has been, we've been talking about this in many, many meetings. I think generally speaking, people want the parks to be open. People don't want to live in a community that has this air of being closed, and more importantly, this like unspoken fear of the masses of people that are going to come and like attack our suburb. I think that is just just an irrational fear. It's not, it's not the community I want to live in, and I live in this community, and other people live in this community. And you know what? People have spoken about this. You guys have listened to so many letters and so many discussions, and I think it's time for you, I think it's time to just move forward. And you know what? If something isn't perfect, you
Just
can.
hit 3 minutes, so if you could try to wrap up early. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. Fair enough. But I do think, it's time to open the park. We can deal with rules, I think, but to have this this fear, irrational fear of these hordes of people, ruining the one bridge going into Matheson Park. I just think that we would be paralyzed to do anything. And I would hope that the village is not going to do a referendum for every decision that the board would have to make. I would think that would be tying your hands in ways that would be, just not manageable. But thank you. And I hope you guys vote to open the park.
Thanks, Arlene. And the referendum question, there's New York state law allows very few things to come to a referendum. This kind of decision is not one of them. So it's not even on the table. So Jeff Wise, because we have a Jeff Gillick right after him.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I had to unmute. Thanks for dealing with this issue. I know it's been very contentious. I also was under the impression that we had left it that after the renovation work was done, the park would be opened on a sort of provisional basis for a year, and that we would see how the use was. I wanted to say, first of all, look, up front, I really strongly feel that it's way past time that we settled this issue. It is the only reasonable answer is for this park to be opened. And I know that some people feel, well, some people we don't know could come in, could be hordes of strangers. There is no way that how are people going to know that this little town of Irvington has even made this change? This will not be broadcast. There won't be, hot updates on CBS News telling the world that they should now immediately run to the Matheson Park. No one will know. And if some people come, great. I would love for people, this is a beautiful community. I myself, I bike and kayak, and I love to explore all around Nyack Beach, Piermont, Tarrytown, all around here. It's a wonderful region, and I love to explore it. And I would love other people in the communities around to do it just as I do, and come visit this amazing place. And this idea, and I think some of the people that I've heard talk tonight, I think have overlooked an important point, that we are all part of a community. So it isn't just about what is optimal for our personal enjoyment or the enjoyment of our family. Yes, you might be inconvenienced conceivably, like there might be 3 people at the kayak rack instead of 2, although I don't even know how that would happen. But listen, part of being in a human community is considering the needs of others and being open to the needs of others and being aware of how it looks to others. If you have a plaque on the side of your gate post that says, residents only, I would love to move beyond this phase of Irvington history. It's a wonderful community, and I would love for other people to come and experience it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeffrey Gullick, who I didn't butcher your last name.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Jeff Glick. Thanks, Mayor Smith. I was part of the RPAC, community process 18 months ago that Joe Archino had open forums, and thanks to all the folks who've weighed in. I strongly support what Jeff Wise and Lisa Chen have said, that it's not the right image for Irvington, which is such a wonderful community. When I've heard people who come to look at homes here are very turned off by the appearance of closed insularity, that the sign, which is not historically accurate, that it's a restriction. So the community has chosen to close its parks, and none of our neighbors do that. And it connotes something that I don't think Irvington is of the future. We are a welcoming, inclusive community with a wonderful heritage, and we can move beyond this piece. The park is generally, as I expressed before, as a dad with 3 kids, and the park has been underused. And I actually think the more people that use it, and we've just invested as a community in the park in upgrading with Janet Kovac's wonderful committee, we just invested in it. But if it's empty, it's filled with geese. And if it's empty, it's not safe. So when it's vibrant, Tarrytown is a much more diverse community, but their open parks there are more used. And so it's safer for kids because there's other kids to play with and there's people around. And every history of community, Jane Jacobs on has always said, more people is safer. So I just sort of categorically reject this fear mongering of the other. None of our neighbors have this kind of insular approach. And I want this to be a wonderful gathering place for Irvington, and that includes including guests. We can go to parks in other river towns and New York City, and no one is. And I think the council last, I would say, has done a great balance by continuing to have special privileges just for Irvington taxpayers, like being able to hold an event only Irvington taxpayers should. I think that's a smart balance, and I don't see anyone could object to it. And as to the cost, it's such a tiny difference compared to even just putting in swing sets like we've just done. it's across, you know, the 5,000 or so residents, it's really kind of a non-issue compared to other things we spend money on. So I support moving forward, and thank you for taking this public comment for months now. Thank you, Mayor, and the whole council.
Thank you. And you brought it up just under 3 minutes. Perfect. Leola?
I already spoke, so I'm going to make it quick. I just wanted to address the concern of our neighbor in Matheson Park. And he asked, what benefit is it to the community? And one benefit that we haven't talked about tonight is the benefit to our local businesses. So people say, oh, you know, I could grab my lunch at Giordane's and go sit in the park to eat it, or at Chutney Marsala, or any of the others. I can have some ice cream in Bazaar and enjoy the sunset. I've often seen people on dates at, you know, the Red Hat. And so it brings business to our local communities when people use our park. So I think that's also a great benefit to our community. We don't want our shuttered Main Street businesses. It's nice that they get daytime businesses, and then the park's closed at night and there's nothing loud or anything. And the loudness too, I share that concern. I'm pretty noise sensitive, so I just think we need to have parameters around radio playing and things, you know, unless it's an event. But yeah, so just don't underestimate the value to our local businesses of having our parks public.
Great, thanks, Leola. Arlene, I believe it's actually Kelly who would like to say something.
Okay, sorry, got one with the mute button.
Hey guys, yeah, it's Kelly. A couple things. The first thing is that because we do have people come spend money here, and in essence they pay taxes here. I think, you know, the issue is like it's okay for them to come spend money here, but they can't sit at a park. That just doesn't sound right. I think we have to look at this, and you know, the concerns about the drones of people that are going to come and vandalize and do reckless things is just, it's not the case. Like most people don't have Irvington on their radar. I'm just going to be honest. Let's just be honest about it. But like to say, and you know, once again, whether or not we want to say it or not, but the big matter is about diversity. And we can't say that we're a diverse community if we don't open up. You know, like we've gotten a lot of good press over the last year, but the reality of it is all of that's a lie if we decide to keep this park shut. And so that's pretty much all my comments. Let us not just let people eat here and spend money here to not go to a park here. That baffles me as a person of color.
Thank you, Kelly. Leola, are you speaking again or just kept your hand up? Richard Turk.
Unmuted, okay. I don't want to misrepresent River House as being against diversity or anything that is for the benefit of Irvington. We love Irvington and we support Irvington. And we're just concerned basically with the congestion issue that would arise as Buckout is a one-way street and it leads right into the bridge. It's actually one of the only ways that people know to get to the restaurants down on Bridge Street. So I don't want to misrepresent us as being against people enjoying the wonderful things that Irvington represents and brings. So we're just concerned about not a safety issue, more of a congestion issue as we see the gentrification all around us that we support. And we support all of the Irvington merchants. There's already parking issues that are problematic from Main Street to the train station. So that's our only real concern as to opening it up.
Great.
And thank you again to all of you for listening and taking our questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up currently. I opened this by saying that I wanted to read through the other correspondence that came in since 5 o'clock. There was only a handful and I was able to read them during this. I don't know if you all would like to take some more time to deliberate, or if you would like to potentially, make a decision tonight, or alternatively, we could, not have another, public comment period on Monday the 3rd and just have our vote then. I think those are probably the three options: vote tonight, vote, on the 3rd, or, just have a vote on the 3rd. I don't know how you all feel. But I think we've heard basically the same arguments on both sides for several years. I didn't hear anything new tonight or read anything new tonight that I hadn't heard before and hadn't considered before. So it's up to you guys. Anyone have a feeling?
I agree that we've heard these arguments, that there was nothing new. That doesn't mean they weren't worth saying and restating.
Correct. And they're not, it's not to say that they aren't legitimate concerns either. I think they are, but
this is a question where I think the devil is in the details. I think from my sense of my fellow board members and certainly for Mayor Smith, there is no desire on our part to lock it down and keep it only the way it's been. We were given an opportunity when we realized we're not required to limit the park to only village residents to figure out how best to open it up. And that's what I think we're talking about, how best to do this. That makes it give some availability to the broadest number of people while still respecting the interests of the taxpayers who are paying for that, which is what I believe Connie had said before. And it's not so simple. That's why we had talked about, one recommendation would be to open it up, starting with the school district and see how it goes. And I still think that might not be a bad idea, but just with the simple passage of time, there's just more of a groundswell to open it quicker and sooner. But there are real practical problems that, we don't have parking. There is just one access road. This isn't easy to get to. And we have to, and there are grills and there are things that are scarce resources and we have to figure it out. So it does take time, and I think we are getting there, and the input is extremely helpful, but I want to make sure we balance those considerations.
Well, as I brought up before, the issue of the scarce resources, and I agree with you, Janice, there's devil in the details in how that's set up. I know in our last meeting, Mr. Archino said that's the one thing that still wasn't worked out in terms of the procedures. And Larry, you brought that up at the beginning, that we needed some public comment and some thinking about what the nature of how you might make that work optimally. So that's the only piece I feel needs a little more thought and input. And for that reason only, I think we could wait, and we don't need a whole nother comment period at our next meeting, but I think we could easily think about that part. We can have some communications perhaps with our PAC about this and do some back and forth before the next meeting, and then simply do a vote at the beginning of the meeting next time. That's, I guess, where I would be right now.
So Connie, just so I'm clear, you're talking about managing resources like tables and barbecues, and if there should be some sort of prioritization scheme based on resident or not, or I'm not sure, or
yeah.
some way to manage it beyond first come, first serve?
Yeah, the details of that interest me. I think there was mention of a totally different system once you meet 50. And I'm just wondering how you would work out the procedure with groups of, say, 15 and 20.
Right.
When I investigated a bit about the county parks, there was some modest fee for everybody when you were a group of, say, 15, and there was a slightly higher fee, again, very modest for those who were not residents. That the details of that we haven't really discussed. What seemed workable and practical, and how do you not game the system? Like you sign up every weekend, and are there limits? And what happens when someone, a group is not responsible, whether they're residents or not residents? I think bad behavior can be spread around. So the working out of that kind of detail, I'm interested, because I think that makes it clearer to people that the management is of great concern, so that it's well used by everybody. That's the only piece I don't think we have the details on.
But I mean, I'm not confident that that's something we'll have, banged out by, 2 weeks from today either. So, I think we almost have to separate that from the decision if we're going to open the park, and assuming that we can come up with good management, or except if that's the issue that, to you is your decision to open it is contingent on how that has worked out, or if you're confident that we could work it out if it is opened, or you're, that kind of thing. I think that's kind of where, the point for me is, like, again, by May 3rd, I know RPAC's worked on it, but I know they haven't, come up with their final rules. So, I think that, my guess is we'd be tweaking those rules right up until the park reopens, if it's open to the public.
Or after it opens, in fact, we might be tweaking the rules.
Yeah, and I'm guessing we'll be tweaking all the rules. I think we talked about that when Joe was presenting the rules, whether it was opened or not. This is something we'd want to look at in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and see how they're working.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, one of the other things that was mentioned, first, a comment to Connie. One thing that concerns me about this is just that I don't know how much some of this can be automated. I don't know how you automate proving, well, I'll give you 2 instances. How do you automate that someone is actually a resident? Okay, that's going to be a little bit difficult to do. The other one is, how do you automate blocking a group from access to the park if they've been misbehaved in the past and caused problems? Because you could have a totally different person represent that group, and you wouldn't even know that it was the same group that had been causing, noise, behavior, whatever problems might have occurred. So there's some level of this that's not going to be solvable certainly through an online mechanism. And I don't know where we go with that, but it's just the reality of it is that there's always going to be, for want of a better word, loopholes. And I don't know how you constrain that. First thought is, that residents do have residency cards that they can use to get, special decrease in fees, let's say, for larger events. That's one thing you could think of. But the only other thing I wanted to mention was there was a comment about the kayak access and about the using the kayak storage area, and a comment that was made by Joe at the time last week or whenever the rules were presented was that rule was really in effect at least during the time that the bathrooms are being reconstructed, because there was no really clear access path to the river that wasn't going to create potential danger. So I didn't read that as a hard and fast. There can never be anything but kayaks that have rental racks. At the same time, he did talk about the desire to have a kayak launch reconstructed at the south end of Scenic Hudson. So there's for those people out there with kayak angst, or whatever you want to call it, there should be some solutions that will be coming. And I don't know that it will be 100% no kayaks allowed without being having a rental on the rack or not.
Right, as I understood that discussion about the kayaks, I thought, and maybe somebody can clarify what Joe said, I thought that it would be very hard because of the length of the path now to go down the hill and reach the place to launch a kayak. Maybe Larry, you know a little more about that or remember that, but I thought it was a fairly hard and fast, you wouldn't be able to bring a kayak in based on his observations that he shared into Matheson. Did I get that right?
If we want to talk about that, Joe is here if we wanted to clarify that.
Well, someone else can remember too. I thought that, I
It
don't
was,
know.
it was a safety concern, for sure.
Yeah,
It had to do with safety.
It's similar to me to the constraints on dogs in the first year. You want to have dogs run over by bikes when we're trying bikes. I think it's pretty practical. And I also think that, Joe and the recreation staff are flexible enough that if we see everything's working great by September, they can say, you know what, maybe we can consider dogs in, September, October, or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be a full year ban. I think that all these things are kind of, fluid.
Yeah, so you asked the question about, was this working out of the procedures for the barbecue grills, the tables? Was that a game changer for me in terms of,
the gatekeeper
decision? No, but I think it does make it clear that we know we need to work out those details for there to be smooth use by everybody, whoever's using it. Those, I don't know how the county does it, but I've seen in the past, if you go to one of their bigger parks and you see a map of all the grills and you go into their form and it says county resident, not county resident. Which one do you want? You reserve it. And I can imagine that the park ranger or the description of a gate attendant, I like to think of that person as more of a welcomer who has a table a bit down from the gate, not somebody looming up there at the, I think that was the intention, that they would have a welcoming kind of role. So if the board wants to decide tonight, I certainly could share my opinion about the main question, but I would like it to be clear that I think a great deal of attention needs to be paid to the way in which that system gets worked out. I believe that if we say to RPAC and to Joe's staff, please work out a system that we can use from the moment we open it, I think they'll be able to do that. I'd like to review it. On the issue, one more thing, on the issue of dogs, I think, there seemed to be a lot of flexibility that Joe mentioned on timelines there. And I think, within 2 months or 3 months, one ought to be able to figure out if the dog issue could be set, like I think you were implying, Brian, like by September or October, let's look at, could it work out sooner to get the dogs with some kind of arrangement where they can accompany their owners into the park under certain circumstances.
I'm just going to say that, again, there was only, I think, 3 pieces of correspondence that I hadn't read coming into this. I was able to, they were short, thankfully. So, I'm ready to make a decision tonight if anybody else is as well.
Well, the other comment, I know that we often hear, Brian and I have been sitting here for, I guess, almost 11 years on this board. And I think the most common thing we've heard once an issue is out there is, I didn't hear about it. I didn't hear about it. I didn't know about it. And I feel bad for people. And I'm not criticizing anybody who said they didn't hear about this, but it's been a dilemma trying to get word out about everything we do.
Yeah.
Unless others on the board think we haven't made a big effort to get the word out, I think we'd have to just say
It's
we've
not just
done our best.
what we've done, but other community groups have certainly gotten the word out. So I
Yeah,
feel
also, yeah.
very strange. Certain types of topics, I feel very strange when someone says they've never heard about it, only because it's like I've got to wonder where they've been over the last 2 years, that there's been such a large discussion and ongoing, and it's been in all the board agendas and in the minutes. So I think it's a pretty clear, and information coming out from the Parks Department. So I think it's pretty clear there's been a lot of information. Now, what we haven't done, is sent up white or black smoke from Village Hall chimney to sort of indicate there's a, what do you call a collection of cardinals to select the next pope?
Sure.
Well, so in this case,
Larry's looking into that for us.
concave, no, it's not concave. What's it called? Anyways, I'm trying to think of the name.
Mary Ann knows.
Mary Ann knows.
The conclave.
Conclave, thank you very much.
Not only a great land use attorney, she's also, she's right for.
I got concave. That was the closest I could get.
And once you said that, Mark, I knew I wasn't going to get the right word.
So anyways, I'm willing to vote myself tonight, but recognizing that we're voting on the notion of the park's access versus the specific rules.
So just as a comment, RPAC has made it clear, Joe and his staff and RPAC have made it clear that they want direction from us. I was hoping that perhaps amongst the dozen of comments today, perhaps someone would talk about a plan in terms of group permits and things of that nature. But I think it's incumbent on us to tell RPAC what we want, have them figure it out. I'm perfectly happy to vote today, and I'm happy to have the board determine whether or not we want there to be some access to limited resources that village residents have some level of priority for, or not.
Well, I would say yes. And I realize I'm probably the total minority voice here, but while I'm very much in favor of opening the park, I think we will have a better sense of what the issues may be, what problems may arise if we buy ourselves a little time, maybe just 3 months, maybe just this summer, to open it to school district residents with perhaps in addition, a specific number of additional permits that could be for the season or daily, just to get a sense, because we're all talking here with really not knowing how much usage there's going to be, what kind of problems may arise. But again, one of the big balance issues here are the concerns of the taxpayers. And just in terms of communication, people, if you haven't signed up for the village emails, do it. That's how you will know all of our agendas and have access to all of the meetings.
Or go to the website, village website, and check the calendar for meetings and see what's up.
There's also the local media. I mean, we certainly still have local print media and online media, and I think they've been pretty good at covering these issues. So I'd say support your local journalism is another, not as your only source, but as one source. And people I think are pretty amazed that they can, they can ask a question to the village administrator, to the mayor, to us. I think we get back pretty quickly. So I do, it does bother me that people don't always know what their local government is doing, but I think that's going to be an ongoing problem. I don't think we can solve it.
It's been ongoing ever since I've even was aware that there was a village government.
Right, no, me too. So it's difficult.
So I'm going to go ahead, and we're not going to solve the people not paying attention to local government or national government for that matter tonight. So I will go ahead and make a motion to remove the resident-only restriction on Matheson Park, if someone would like to second that motion.
I would like to second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Janet, you vote either way or abstaining?
Oh, no, I said I'm not opposed. I will vote for it. I just, with the provision that we have further discussion about.
Yes, I agree. And, I think that, I think everyone in this debate has been, I found we've had a lot of the different debates over the years that have been somewhat contentious. I think this one comes from a good place on both sides of the open or don't open it. I think we've found from our research that good management can ensure a well-run park that I actually think could be enhanced for residents, especially if you have that greeter type person that's going to be able to help you with, finding things, learning what's going on in the village even, as well as, opening up the Matheson Park for potential for grants. In the past, I've looked at something as wide ranging as, adding a stage to the park on a permanent basis, to obviously the bathrooms, to even something as far afield as potentially sharing a police boat area at the far side of the park that the county, the state, and the river towns could share. But none of that could be done because Matheson Park was a private park, and you weren't, you couldn't use available funds from anywhere other than the Irvington taxpayers. So while there is an additional cost this year, I'm hopeful that there will be, the opportunity for, large savings for future development plans in Matheson Park. I have every confidence in RPAC to come up with, to tweak the rules as necessary, to come up with a good sense of how it should work for residents and non-residents for the scarce resources. I also feel that, Joe Archino and his team can definitely manage things well, especially given the right resources. And, we've told Joe that, err on the side of being cautious at the time for this year, as we see it, as we do that kind of test period. And I'm confident that not only will Matheson Park benefit from this, but I think Scenic will as well, because we'll have, some more resources this summer that we can shift back and forth between the parks. And also I think Scenic Hudson has gotten a large influx of non-residents because so many parks have been outright closed during COVID, that this will also help, just with much more physical space than we have for Scenic. So I think there's a lot of positives to this, and I think the negatives are well known, and we'll try to manage them and stay ahead of them, parking being the big one. But I also do believe that parking limits the amount of usage. It's not FTR Park on the Taconic that has parking for 800 cars, so that's going to limit the amount of people that are going to travel here from across the county or from up north or Connecticut, because there's not parking. And on the weekends when there's most use, there is the Metro North parking, which, I think we'll have to publicize that you can park in the Metro North lots. I mean, there's a lot of specifics we can work on, but I think this overall, kind of broad brush of saying, let's open this park now that we know that we can. And I'm proud of finally doing this after all these years of talking about it. And Mark would like to say something.
Yes, Brian, I just wanted to break in on your tail end and just say that I totally agree with what Larry Lonke was saying. I think we need to talk, and not in a delayed fashion, but maybe at the next work session, I don't know, and come up with some areas where we think that the access requirements could be, give some direction to RPAC rather than just ask them to work totally blind on things like the stuff that keeps coming up is preferential access to to limited resources, or even if there should be some sort of a sliding fee schedule based on residency, but also on size of group. So let's try to get that stuff nailed down, but also let's give them some good, from our discussions, give them a good straw man to react to. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, rather than just throw them into the water and say, hey, go figure it out yourselves. I think
that's what I was saying, Mark. I would like to do that. And give that kind of direction. But I know, Janice, you brought up the idea about the school district. I would say respectfully, I would prefer that we go ahead and do this with attention to those management things, but not put that particular level of restriction on at this point.
Well, that train has left the station as of about
Yes, it has left the station. But I agree with Mark that it should be on us to assist with establishing the parameters of how we're going to manage the scarce resources, not just throw it back to RPAC. So I would agree on a next work session, we perhaps should give a little thought to that.
Or lead up to it so we can actually discuss it in more detail.
There was one other thing that has been under discussion, and I realize that the close neighbors have additional problems that they perceive, and I think it's our responsibility to look at the concerns that they have and make sure that we have done everything we can to ensure that they're not lifestyle issues. One thing that we've discussed under other reasons was about as you come off Buckout Street and reach the edge of the bridge, that you not be able to go straight, that you have to make a left turn. In other words, the only way to get to Bridge Street is to come up Astor and then make the turn. That there's been, because Buckout is narrow and has a lot of problems with traffic, kind of coming around that corner. So we discussed that in relationship to a bigger project maybe 3 years ago by now, but that's something that affects some of that traffic, which we could think about again. And what is the closing time again? Is it dusk or 10 or, I guess one thing to say about noise, the park isn't open at night. And I guess parking does limit the use during the week. But Metro North, people will have to adjust to the idea you might have to park fairly far and walk to the park. We like walking. It's part of being outside. So anyway, there are practical things about the near neighbors that I think we should discuss.
So, in the interest of time, I want to just try to break things down a little bit here. So the rules that were reviewed at the last work session, what I've heard, although there can always be tweaks, but in large part, the board is accepting of what was presented to you. Otherwise you would have had additional feedback on that. What I'll do is work with Marianne to take those rules and codify whatever needs to be codified. Not everything in there, of course, needs to end up in the village code. There are certain things that need to for enforcement reasons and whatnot. So we'll spend some time going through that and doing that. So you will eventually see this back in front of you, at least the portion of it that needs to end up in the village code, because you'll need to vote on that. As far as the direction for RPAC, again, in the interest of time, I think rather than wait for the next work session, which is almost a month from now, I think if you all as board members send me just a couple of very high level concerns or observations, concerns is probably too strong of a word, but just your observations about how you think the scarce resources need to be allocated. There's not a lot of scarce resources here. We're talking about barbecue grills and picnic areas, right? So, but rather than getting into the details of how things get booked and whether it's online or not online, just send me the types of things you want to see. Do you want village residents to have some sort of preference? Do you want it to have exclusivity over certain things? Do you want it to have no exclusivity, just completely wide open? Just high level concerns or observations from your standpoint. Send them to me. I'll kind of distill them and make sure they get to RPAC so that would be their guidance. You don't have to be unanimous on this board approach. Just express your observations to me. I'll distill it and get it to RPAC so they can start working on it. So they have some sort of guidance on it. I don't think we can really wait until the middle of May to have the board meet in public and have a consensus and all of that. You know what I mean? We can come back.
We can finalize it.
That comes up with, but just from your standpoint, just send your individual observations to me, and then I'll get it.
One thing though that I just want to throw into that mix, because you mentioned resources, but we also talked about size of groups. So there's another thing that there may be permit fees that are variable based on size of group or origin of group. So that's part of, it's not just, that's the larger resource of the park itself, not just the tables and barbecues.
No, but group permits is certainly one of the scarce resources. There's not unlimited group permits able to be issued every week.
I just wanted to be sure that
Yeah.
was
Yep.
explicit. Okay. So when do you want our input by?
Tomorrow.
It's possible. Brian?
Good night. No, Friday maybe. So Larry can put it together.
Yeah.
The way I envision is that Larry can get that list to RPAC. And, you know, it's not something we need a formal resolution and a public hearing on. I mean, we can take public input, obviously, but it's not something we need. We can actually, you know, kind of say we can say that we accept the idea, you know, either probably not by Monday the 3rd, but by the end of that work session, the following Wednesday, we can all be in agreement on it, I believe.
Well, we do have to vote on the rules, right? Accept the rules or not?
The portion that's going to end up in the village code formally comes back to you as something you vote on. The rest of the rules, frankly, that's not something that the board has always micromanaged in the past. You know what I mean? You know, there's items in there that just, you know, I mean, what are the hours of the splash pad? You know, I mean, things like that are not village code driven and really are under the purview of RPAC and the recreation department.
Yeah, and I think that there are some items that, you know, like the splash pads are probably the best example where, you know, now it should be open for everybody, but you might have to schedule it. You know, there's things like that where we have to adapt someone on the fly and work with our PAC and the rec as we go. I mean, if they need guidance from us, you know, let them run the project for sure. But okay, well, I think we put this behind us now. We can move on to appointments to the library board, Larry. Which we will not be taking public comment on. But I will resolve to appoint Sarah Kelsey to the library board for a term to expire December 31st, 2022, if I can have a second.
I will second, and I also will have a comment.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm very happy, you know, that the library board does what it does. And I know there's been one retirement and that we have a community where someone will step up and say, I'll fill that. And I think Sarah can do that.
And
very
well. Are you the liaison to the library, Connie?
No, I just go there when
Janice,
I
are
can.
you?
I bet I Janice will.
Janice, yeah.
Well,
Janice.
I have been to the library as the library liaison, but Janice has been doing an excellent job.
Janice, I was going to just say, if you wanted to offer them to do a ceremonial swearing in, I don't think we've ever done that before, but there's no reason we can't. So I kind of thought, so you can offer it. I don't know if anyone would ever want to do that, but you know,
No, I just know that I think she will be a wonderful addition to the board. I know she's leading one of the programs, sorry, bear with me for a second, related to the Founders Day and a walk up to the mansion. So this is wonderful. I think the library board looks for good representatives of the community.
Great. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next up is resolved to appoint the following officers to the Irvington Fire Department for a one-year term. Fire Chief Daniel Billings, First Assistant Fire Chief James Ruffler, Second Assistant Fire Chief Anthony Tarracone, Lieutenant David Dowd, Lieutenant Andrew Limberti, Lieutenant Stephen Mangicotti, Lieutenant Joseph Trauma. Again, I had the great pleasure of anyone who missed the beginning of the meeting and while I'm in a suit of swearing in all the officers of the fire department tonight. We wish them all safety and health and success as they keep our village safe. And I will make a motion and ask for a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next up is approval of an extending contract for tree removal, tree pruning, and stump grinding.
Pretty straightforward. We have the ability to extend it, and the contract and the contractor is working out fine. So we're taking up that option. Same comment applies. Same comment. Yeah, exactly. Same comment applies to the upcoming agenda items as well.
Great. Be it resolved that the village administrator is authorized to extend the contract for tree removal, tree pruning, and stump grinding with the Davy Tree Expert Company, the Care of Trees, for an additional year, June 1st, 2021 to May 31st, 2022, for the unit prices specified in their bid submitted on May 6th, 2020. I will make a motion if I can have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Next up is approval extending contract 2020-10 for miscellaneous hardware and supplies. I think it speaks for itself, Larry. I'm going to read it. If anybody has any questions, you can stop me. Be it resolved that the village administrator is authorized to extend the contracts for miscellaneous hardware and supplies with Irvington Hardware, Reader's True Value Hardware, and Hilti Inc. for an additional year, June 1st, 2021 to May 31st, 2022, for the unit prices specified in their bids submitted on May 6th, 2022. I'll make a motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next up, extending contract for auto parts. Be it resolved that the village administrator is authorized to extend the contract for auto parts with IEH Auto Parts LLC, Schultz Ford Lincoln, and Red's Auto and Truck Parts for an additional year, June 1st, 2021 to May 31st, 2022, for the unit prices specified in their bid submitted May 6th, 2020. I will make a motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next up, approval extending contract 2012 for heavy equipment. Be it resolved that the village administrator is authorized to extend the contracts for heavy equipment with Tom Bucci Excavating and Carl Dibble Inc. for an additional year, June 1st, 2021 to May 31st, 2022, with the unit prices specified in their bid submitted on May 6th, 2020. I'll make the motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Next up, we have reports of boards, standing committees, and officers. Trustee liaison reports. Mark.
Well, I was trying to find the email and I can't find it. The GPTF has just released their new website. And if I can find the email, I don't know which machine it's on, but maybe someone else has it as well because it was sent around to all of us, I think. Do you have it, Larry?
EcoIrvington.org. EcoIrvington.org.
Right. It's got a lot of good information on it. So when you get a chance, go and check it out. And you know, it's organized in a good way, you know, a good way to find information you need on particular topics and tasks. So kudos to them for getting that done.
Great. Larry?
The farmer's market is still running on an every other Sunday schedule, and this coming Sunday they will be open at 9:30. From Parks and Rec, tomorrow Joan Armstrong, Larry Schofer, and Joe will be discussing plans for the potential reopening of the senior center. There are a few spots left this Saturday's apple grafting program that's scheduled at the O'Hara Nature Center. It's official summer day camp. It's official. Summer day camp returns July 12th for 4 weeks. Fees and registration information will be released this week. The O'Hara Nature Center will be closed through Friday for maintenance and cleaning. And the holiday tree that was in front of Village Hall was moved and replanted in front of the rec center.
Great. Connie?
Well, in my role of downtown advocacy, I did do a little field trip with two residents, and one is our new contact with the chamber, the Rivertowns Chamber. And we experimented with the phone app that is the walking tour. So we have comments to send back to the company that's made it, Travel Stories, to work out some of the things that were a little a little confusing. So we wanted to help businesses because on the kiosks at the bridge, you can be promoting your local business in Irvington, and we just need to get the updated information. And it's I'll keep up with the chamber and see if I can get some help from them to do all this. But I think we see restaurants are going to come back. I don't know if you're all following what's replacing some of the ones who are not opening, but I think we're going to have quite a surge of business coming back. I mean, maybe some of you know more than I do, but I'm beginning to see some good signs.
Great. Janice?
Yeah, from the fire, just Chief Billings has had a new record. He sent me a report before I asked him, which is a great way to start. said he's looking forward to working with all of us. Training on 420, ground ladder aerial trainings on 5/4 and 5/18. And COVID response, the majority of members have been vaccinated. Very with many natural gas calls, MVAs, and automatic alarms. Irvington Boat Club still working on securing insurance to fix the dock. Marine unit will stay available from the trailer, still respond as another set of eyes if anything comes up. And Larry Schaffer and Ed are included in emails for the Irvington Boat Club. And for the library, there are a bunch of programs coming up. Again, people should consult the website, but a couple of the highlights, planning options for New York Medicaid home care eligibility, which has expanded. So this might be very useful for many people. Tuesday, 4:20 at 2 p.m. Rudderless, how to navigate the world as an autistic person. Monday, 4:20 at 2 p.m., 4:26 at 2 p.m. Women in the River Town Speak Out, Thursday, 4:29 at 1:30. Then Red, White, and Blue, the Statue of Liberty and the history of some of the stories of America, Saturday, 5:1 at 2 p.m. And Navigating the Maze of Long-Term Care, Tuesday, 5/4 at 7. We talked a bit about Founders Day, and there will be a walk that's at 5/8, so please check out that for more details. And Teens Tweens Mother's Day gift workshop will be on the Saturday before Mother's Day. And they were hoping to begin again opening the library for visits, for browsing visits. Very happy about it. Okay, that's it.
I'm muting myself. Village Administrator's report. Sorry, Larry.
Okay, I was just going to start talking.
Yeah, you're excited.
Last couple of days, we've been working on getting the digital speed signs back in order and properly reporting on the cloud. So our traffic data will be, again, utilized by our traffic enforcement officer and even our traffic calming committee. We also have replaced the radar device that had been previously stolen. So that device will start to be deployed on a regular basis, again, in conjunction with the traffic officer in the police department. So we're looking forward to getting back on track with that.
Village Clerk Treasurer's report.
We've installed a secure box in the vestibule for tax and water payments. We found that a lot of people took advantage of the drop box we had there, but it wasn't secured. So now we have a locked one where people can come in even after hours if the front doors are open or before Village Hall clerk's office is open and make a payment.
Great. Village Attorney's report.
No, I don't have one.
Public comment. Yola.
Hi, I wondered if I might be allowed to consult with the folks making the decisions on the kayaks for both parks, only because you may remember from Scenic Hudson, the ramp was installed too short for the tide and then it was extended and it was never the right thing. You really have to consult with kayakers when you make decisions about kayak use. And for Matheson, it's a much safer launch when you launch from a beach like Matheson. It's really, really great. And kayakers tend to be really resilient. So I'm not sure, this idea that, for example, my kayak's at the river, but my friend can't meet me and drop a kayak, bring a kayak with me. We're pretty resilient and adaptable. And so the perception that it might be dangerous for a kayak to be brought in may or may not be correct. So I wondered if I might offer my availability to consult.
I'm going to say I would email RPAC or Joe Archino with your suggestions. And I think it's going to be one of those things where they're going to be monitoring it. And if it's super congested and there's constantly 100 bikes flying through, Matheson Park, then it might still be an issue. And you probably won't have dogs back for a while and we won't have kayaks in. But I think I'd email RPAC or Joe Archino. Who should they email for RPAC? Or is there a group email?
It's really not. There's no central. I would direct it to Joe and that'll get them in touch with RPAC.
So J. Archino, or you can find him on the website.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Michael Hanna, under his alias.
Hi.
How are you?
So I want to be among the many residents who thank you for your vote tonight regarding Matheson Park. You know, our village is not a static environment. There's change going on all the time. And so while there are still considerations about certain managerial aspects of the decision, you know, I'm sure year to year, there'll be some adjustments made, you know, in terms of optimizing the operation of the parks, as you know, with anything that the village operates. But I think you, as all of you expressed, you know, has spent a lot of time. There was a lot of public awareness that for people who wanted to tune in on the topic. I read it in the newspaper. I've seen emails. I've been at in-person meetings and remote meetings. You've talked about this a lot, and I think tonight was a great night to make the decision. I think as some of the comments I heard tonight, it's not the biggest decision you can make, but it's an important one because it does signal that the park is for everyone. And as someone else said, you know, we also want to make the community more inclusive for folks who'd like to live here. And so, you know, I would just tie it to the rezoning, the Broadway, North Broadway rezoning discussion you're having, that, you know, you as a board and as a village are making some really important progress on these initiatives that only make Irvington better. And so I congratulate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Larry, any follow-up items? I mean, beyond the obvious, I didn't really have any specific ones. Obviously working with RPAC and Joe on the you know, group stuff and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I didn't have any specific follow-ups. So I will make a motion to adjourn to executive session.
Yeah, oh no, I was just going to interrupt you because it isn't on the agenda, and I did ask if the board would be okay to meet with me in executive session on personnel.
Yeah, regarding the building department. So I'll make the motion if someone will give me a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. So Larry, we have a different login.
You have a link for that. Yep. Everyone good with
Thanks
that? Okay.
everyone for coming out tonight. We look forward to working with you on all of the stuff we discussed.